Hello there, and welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we invite you to step quietly into the distant sands of time, to drift gently into the rhythms of another world, one that moves at its own pace, far slower than our modern days, a place where the Nile flows steadily through an ancient land of stone and sun. This evening, we journey into the world of ancient Egypt, not the Egypt of myths and legends, not the thundering pyramids or grand declarations of kings, but rather the soft footfalls of daily life, the quiet breath of dawn over a barley field, the clatter of a wooden bowl, the whisper of linen garments, the scent of crushed herbs and baked clay. You might think you'd fare well in this world, but as we'll see tonight, even the most ordinary day in ancient Egypt was a test of endurance, of adaptability, and of quiet, relentless labor. Over the course of the next 2 hours, we'll explore what it was truly like to live, work, and endure in one of the world's oldest civilizations, from the life of the farmer to the intrigues of the pharaoh's court, from ancient recipes and rituals to burial rites and forgotten mysteries. There will be no need to keep track. You may fall asleep whenever you wish. The past will keep flowing, quietly, without need of your attention. Let's begin with the rising of the sun over the fields of the Nile. Segment 1. A day in the life of an ancient Egyptian farmer. Imagine yourself lying on a woven mat in a mud brick home. The walls cool to the touch in the early dawn. There is no glass in the window, just a narrow slit in the clay to let in the faint morning breeze. Outside, the sky is beginning to blush faintly with the colors of sunrise, soft hues of terracotta and gold stretching over the horizon. You are a farmer, a fella, as your descendants will one day be called, though that word does not exist yet. You are one of many, tied not to land by ownership, but by duty. Your fields belong to a noble, or a temple, or perhaps the state itself. Still, they are your charge, your livelihood, your burden. Your home is small, perhaps 2 or 3 rooms, one for sleeping, one for cooking, another for storage or animals. The walls are plastered, uneven. Their surface holds the gentle scent of dry earth. A low fire smolders in a hearth made of stones, not for warmth, for the desert chill is already lifting, but for the preparation of your first simple meal. There are no clocks, no alarms. The rhythm of your day is set by light and by need. Already you hear others stirring, the quiet murmur of neighbors, the bleat of a goat, the creak of wooden doors. You step outside, barefoot, the packed dirt warm and smooth under your soles. You squint toward the river. The Nile, lifeblood of your land, glints gently in the distance. In this season, the parade, or growing season, the waters have receded. The fields are moist, the earth dark and rich. You carry a worn wooden hoe, its handle polished smooth by years of hands. There will be hours of stooping, weeding, sowing, tending. The air smells faintly of damp soil and straw, of distant smoke, and of life lived close to the earth. Your breakfast is modest, a coarse barley cake, perhaps flavored with honey if you are lucky, and a drink made of fermented grain, cloudy, thick, and sour. It fills your stomach, if not your heart. There is little conversation as you work, just the sounds of labor, the hiss of a sickle through stalks, the grunt of oxen pulling a plow. Tools are simple, unchanged for centuries. Wooden plows, stone weights, rope braided from flax. The sun rises higher, and the work becomes harder. The linen cloth around your shoulders clings damply to your skin. The field must be fed, and through it, so must you. Children run past, laughing, chasing a stray dog. One girl balances a jug of water on her head. Their joy is simple and fleeting. By midday, you retreat to a shady grove of palms, your body weary, your muscles aching. You sit upon a flat rock, the stone warm from the sun. You sip water stored in porous clay jars, cool from evaporation. You chew dried dates. You close your eyes. For a moment, there's peace. Then it is time again to labor. And so the day passes. The sun begins to descend. The light softens. You gather your tools. Place them carefully by the entrance to your home. You are tired, but this is not new. You are always tired. Inside, your wife tends a small fire. She has ground grain with a stone corn all day, kneeling, rocking it back and forth. The flour fine and powdery under her fingers. Your youngest child sleeps nearby, wrapped in linen. Dinner is stew, made from lentils, onions, leeks, cooked slowly in a ceramic pot. You eat in silence, scooping with flat bread. Outside, frogs begin to sing from the riverbanks. A breeze stirs the papyrus reeds. As night falls, you sit on the roof to escape the heat. The stars emerge, bright and numerous. There are no streetlights, no hum of electricity, just the sounds of crickets. The distant call of a jackal. You think little of tomorrow. It will be the same, and thus ends the day of an ordinary Egyptian farmer. In the time of the New Kingdom, perhaps around 1300 BCE, a life of quiet toil. A rhythm as ancient as the Nile. But not all lives followed this rhythm. Some lived differently. Higher in the social world, or far more precariously. Let us now leave the fields and step softly into the stone corridors of power. Segment 2. Hatshepsut, the woman who became Pharaoh. Let us now rise from the low huts of the village and ascend the pale stone steps of power. The air here is different, drier, scented faintly with incense, myrrh and frankincense drifting from bronze braziers. The sounds are hushed. Soft voices, sandals scuffing polished floors, the gentle clink of gold and carnelian jewelry. You are no longer among the field workers. You are in the palace, and at the center of it all is a woman. One who was not meant to rule, and yet she did. Her name was Hatshepsut. Imagine her now, poised at the edge of a wide portico, the columns towering behind her, carved with prayers to Amun-Ra and images of divine birth. Her face is serene, eyes lined with dark kohl, her gaze fixed across the desert horizon. She wears the nenas, the striped headcloth of kings, upon her chin, a ceremonial beard bound with cloth and symbolism. It is not meant to fool, but to declare. She is Pharaoh. But it was not always so. Hatshepsut was born around 1507 BCE into a royal family of the 18th dynasty. Her father, Thutmose I, was a successful military leader, a man who expanded Egypt's reach into Nubia and beyond. Her early years were spent within the palace walls, learning rituals, languages, diplomacy, the quiet education of a royal daughter. She married her half-brother, as was tradition, Thutmose II. Their union was not romantic, nor unusual. It was political, meant to secure lineage and stability. When he died, young and ailing, their son, Thutmose III, was still a child, too small to rule, too fragile to command, and so Hatshepsut stepped forward. At first, as regent, a caretaker, a placeholder, but then something remarkable happened. She did not step back. Over time, she took on more royal titles. Her depictions in carvings changed. From a woman standing behind the throne, to a king striding ahead of all others. What must her days have been like? Imagine her in the palace at Karnak, conferring with scribes, priests, advisors. The papyrus scrolls spread before her, decrees, census records, temple budgets. She speaks calmly, her voice low, assured. She knows the laws. She understands that God's favor must be demonstrated through deeds and stone. She commissions monuments, great ones. Temples rise beneath her command, including her crowning achievement, the mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, carved into the cliffs of western Thebes. It is a vision of symmetry and grace. Terraces climbing toward the sky, shaded by colonnades, echoing with chants and the shuffle of sandaled feet. Her reign is peaceful, prosperous. Trade flourishes. Ships journey to the distant land of Punt, a land rich in myrrh trees and gold. They return bearing exotic goods: giraffe skins, ebony, aromatic resins. Reliefs in her temple depict this expedition in fine detail, not with grandeur, but with pride, a record. Not just of power, but of connection. Yet, still, she walks a delicate line. She wears male regalia, but her statues sometimes show softer features. She calls herself His Majesty, but also invokes the title God's Wife of Ammon. Her power is carefully crafted, a balance of divine right, tradition, and quiet boldness. And what of the boy king, Thutmose III? He waits, grows, learns, and one day he will rule. But for 2 decades, Hatshepsut holds the reins, quietly, effectively. When she dies, perhaps around the age of 50, her legacy begins to unravel. Her name is chiseled from monuments, statues smashed, records recarved, as though someone, or many, wished to erase her. But stone has a long memory, and now we remember her, not as a usurper, but as a builder, not as an impostor, but as a sovereign. Her story is not loud, nor violent. It is steady, determined, enduring, and in this she is not unlike the very land she ruled, layered, resilient, shaped by time. Now, let us leave the palace behind and descend into something older still, a mystery buried beneath the sand and silence. Segment 3: The Lost City of the Workers. Dear El Medina, let us now turn away from the grandeur of pharaohs and the open plains of the Nile, and follow a narrow path winding westward into the dry hills that cradle the Valley of the Kings. Here, nestled among rock and silence, lies a place once hidden, almost forgotten, a village unlike any other in ancient Egypt, a community of artisans, scribes, stonecutters, and painters, the builders of eternity. This is Deir el Medina. Imagine approaching it on foot, the dusty trail crunching softly beneath your sandals. The sun above is sharp and unwavering, but the wind is still and the world is hushed. You pass through a broken stone gate and step into what once was a vibrant village. Now only the low outlines of walls remain, like faint echoes of laughter and toil. But once it was full of life. The people who lived here were special. They were chosen, Khan selected, to carve the tombs of kings. Not just anyone could dwell in Deir el Medina. These workers were literate, skilled, and trusted. They worked directly under the authority of the pharaoh, sealed into sacred projects, far from the prying eyes of the wider world. Their labor was secret and sacred now. Imagine walking through the village as it once was. The houses are small but neat, built of stone and mud brick, clustered along a central lane. They are warmer in winter, cooler in summer. Inside, each room serves a purpose: sleeping, cooking, storing goods. The air smells of bread, baking, and the faint sweetness of date paste. Here, women tend to children, grind grain, weave cloth. Men rise early, not to till the fields, but to walk into the valley, into the living rock. They labor in shifts, 8 days on, 2 days off. Each morning, they shoulder their tools: bronze chisels, wooden mallets, red ochre for sketching, and trek into the cliffsides. There, in the hush of shadowed caverns, they shape the eternal. The tombs of kings are not built in a day, nor in a year. Sometimes the same tomb is worked on for decades. In flickering torchlight, they draw gods and stars on walls of limestone. They paint the journey of the soul through fire, judgment, and fields of reeds. Their brushes are made of reeds and palm fibers, dipped into pigments ground from the earth itself: blue from copper, yellow from arsenic, black from soot. Their hands do not shake. Their lines are sure. And in the evenings, they return to their village. They gather, they eat, they write. Yes, they write. For dear El Medina was home to some of the most literate commoners in ancient Egypt. On shards of pottery called astraca, they recorded lists, letters, prayers, even jokes. One might read, "The scribe did not show up today. He claims his feet hurt, but I think he overslept." These fragments, found by modern archaeologists, tell stories that feel close, human. A man complains about a stolen cloak. A woman writes a prayer for fertility. A neighbor files a complaint about a donkey being borrowed too long. Their world, while ancient, feels familiar. But life was not always simple here. Despite their privileges, food rations, stable income, government housing, the workers of Deir el Medina sometimes suffered. There were labor strikes, the earliest recorded in history. When payments of grain were delayed, the workers stopped, sat down, demanded justice, calmly, persistently. Even within this tucked-away village, there were tensions, affairs, arguments, losses. And when death came, as it did, quietly and without grandeur, the people buried their own with care. Tombs here are smaller than the pharaohs, but no less beautiful. painted walls, offerings placed with gentle hands. Imagine, if you will, a small tomb sealed by a stone door. The god Anubis watches. Above, stars are painted on a dark blue ceiling. He is not a king, but he carved one, and now he rests in the same hills. Dear El Madina reminds us that behind every monument, every towering statue, there were hands, minds, lives. And so we leave this village of the forgotten artisans and drift now toward the temples, where ceremony and spectacle met divine belief. Let us observe the world of priests and offerings, and glimpse the invisible work of keeping balance between gods and men. Segment 4. Ritual and Reverence. Inside an ancient Egyptian temple, we now leave behind the dust of the workers' village, the clinking of chisels on stone, the rhythm of craftsmanship shaped by human hands. We step gently into a different realm, one where the rhythm is not that of labor, but of ritual. A space not built for survival or expression, but for continuity. Sacred, solemn, and echoing with centuries of prayerful silence. This is the temple, not merely a religious building, but the dwelling place of gods. To understand the ancient Egyptian temple is to enter a space where the divine was thought to reside among mortals, not symbolically, but literally. The gods, it was believed, needed homes, real, permanent places of stone and incense where they could be honored, nourished, and protected. These temples were more than monuments. They were engines of cosmic balance, centers of ritual activity whose very operations ensured that the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and chaos would remain at bay. Imagine yourself approaching such a place at dawn, perhaps the great temple of Amun at Karnak, sprawling, majestic, and older than most cities on earth today. The air is cool, even in the desert. The sandstone walls still hold the chill of night. The first rays of the sun begin to touch the tops of pylons, those monumental gateways, flanked by colossal statues and lined with flagpoles that once held banners fluttering in the wind. The outer courtyard is vast, quiet, and empty of crowds. This is not a place for congregational worship. The temple was not built for the people. It was built for the God. As you pass through layers of walls and columns, the light dims. The deeper you go, the more the noise of the outside world falls away. The hypostyle hall is a forest of stone rows of towering pillars with capitals shaped like papyrus blossoms. The columns rise far above your head, so tall they seem to disappear into shadow. Their surfaces are covered with relief carvings, scenes of deities standing in profile, of sacred animals and eternal symbols. Everything here is deliberate. Every inch of wall space is spoken for. A group of priests moves through the halls with practiced grace. They wear simple robes of white linen, freshly laundered, and their heads are shaveda, mark of ritual purity. Before entering this sacred space, they have bathed in special pools, refrained from certain foods, abstained from contact with death. Their voices are low, their feet soft against the stone. These are not public figures. They are caretakers of the divine. Their purpose is simple, yet vital. The God must be awakened, fed, clothed, and honored every single day, without fail. Inside the deepest chamber of the temple, the inner sanctuary, known as the Naya, stands a shrine. Its doors are sealed with clay and cords, bearing the mark of the previous day's rituals. The high priest approaches. A chant begins. The seal is broken. The doors creak open, and within lies the god's statues, small by comparison to the vastness of the temple, yet incalculably powerful in. This statue, often gilded and inlaid with semi-precious stones, represents the divine presence of the God on earth. It is not simply an image, it is the God inhabiting physical form. The ritual begins slowly. The priest greets the deity with recitations that have not changed in centuries. He washes the statue with purified water, dries it with fine linen, anoints it with sacred oils of myrrh and lotus. Then come the vestments, fresh linen wrappings, beads, and possibly even a small crown. Each step is accompanied by prayer. The God, though silent, is being honored as a living being. Next comes the offering of food. A tray of goods is brought in: breads, fruit, beer, roasted meat, fine wine. The priest presents it with reverence, setting it before the God as though before a royal guest. But the essence of the food, the spiritual sustenance, is believed to be absorbed. Later, the priests will consume the meal as sacred leftovers, an act known as the reversion of offerings. Nothing is wasted, but nothing is rushed. These ceremonies are repeated 3 times a day: morning, midday, and evening. The process is methodical, unchanged, carefully preserved across generations. Rituals written on papyrus scrolls or carved into temple walls guide each movement. Even the precise words are recorded, recited with a tone not of passion but of solemn duty. For the priests, this is more than religion. It is the maintenance of the world. Outside the inner sanctum, temple life continues. Scribes record offerings, keep inventories of temple goods, and oversee the movement of supplies. For temples are not only religious centers, they are also economic hubs. Large temples like Karnak own vast tracts of farmland, herds of cattle, fishing fleets, granaries, and workshops. They employ thousands of craftsmen, weavers, cooks, gardeners, and laborers. The temple is a world within a world, humming quietly with activity, but always beneath the surface of the sacred. And yet, the temple remains mostly closed to the general population. The ordinary Egyptian may approach its outer walls, offer prayers in the courtyard, or leave votive offerings at the entrance. But the divine presence remains distant, accessible only through the intercession of trained ritualists. The stone and ceremony stand between the mortal and the immortal. Still, the presence of the gods permeates life. Festivals are held where the statues are taken from their shrines and paraded through the streets in sacred barges. Music and incense fill the air. It is during these rare occasions that the people may glimpse the hidden face of divinity, brief, glorious, and veiled in gold. And then, just as quietly, the statue returns. The doors of the shrine are closed once more, sealed again with clay and cord. The sanctum is plunged into darkness, and the air grows still. The god sleeps, not in ignorance, but in peace until the sun rises again. You step back from the temple, blinking into daylight. The stone columns fade behind you. The incense lingers in your memory, as does the careful, quiet labor of those who maintained the sacred. You've walked not through spectacle, but through order, not through mystery, but through structure. A day in the temple is not filled with noise or drama. It's filled with repetition, ritual, reverence. Every step deliberate, every gesture meaningful. Now, let us leave this sacred domain, where silence holds the walls in place. Let us return to the world of ink and scrolls, of careful records and quiet authority. The temple was built by stone, but the story of Egypt was written in papyrus. Let us now follow the path of the scribe. Segment 5. The quiet power of the pen. A day in the life of an Egyptian scribe. From the incense-scented darkness of the temple sanctuary, we emerge once again into the light, though this time not the brilliance of noon, nor the dusky orange of sunset, but the soft, pale glow of an early morning near the Nile. The world is still cool, the mist rising gently from the riverbanks, the reeds stirring with the breeze. In the distance, the cry of an ibis breaks the silence for a moment before all returns to quiet. Along a well-worn path, passing fishermen setting out in small papyrus boats and farmers lifting baskets of mud brick for repair. We come upon a modest house, rectangular, whitewashed, and slightly sunken into the dusty ground. It belongs not to a craftsman nor a noble, but to one whose work is less visible, yet immensely powerful. Today, we walk in the footsteps of a scribe. The scribe's day does not begin with hammer or hoe, but with a sharpened reed and a palette of black and red ink. He is a man of letters in a world where literacy is rare and respected. The vast majority of Egyptians could not read or write. The scribes could. And because of that, they stood at the crossroads of knowledge, government, religion, and law. Their tools were simple: a wooden board, a roll of papyrus, a handful of pigments. And with them, they captured the workings of a civilization. His home is quiet, but not luxurious. A small courtyard allows the morning sun to filter in, lighting the place where he keeps his scrolls and ink. His garments are clean, but plain linen, wrapped simply, suited to his work. He does not labor under the sun like the farmers, nor handle the precious stones of the goldsmith. Instead, he deals in symbols and in meaning. In his hands, marks become orders, contracts, prayers, and chronicles. He begins by preparing his instruments. The reed pen must be trimmed precisely, the ink mixed with water and carefully stirred, black for standard text laws, lists, letters, red for headings, divine names, or moments of special emphasis. The papyrus is unrolled, weighted gently at its edges with stones to hold it flat in the breeze. Before the first stroke, there is stillness, a moment of thought, of respect for the act of writing itself. For the scribe, this is not mere record-keeping. It is shaping the breath of the kingdom into permanence. Today's tasks are many. The local official requires a record of grain distributions, complex list of names, weights, and destinations. He must also transcribe a decree from the vizier, written in more formal script, demanding accuracy and elegance. And a merchant has come, requesting help, drafting a will to divide his property among his children. Each scroll is different. Each serves its place in the machinery of society. As he writes, the scribe works slowly and steadily. The symbols he forms are hieratic flowing, connected, a faster cousin of the sacred hieroglyphs. He knows those two, of course, for temple work, funerary inscriptions, or royal decrees. He would turn to them the pictures of falcons, ankhs, eyes, and lotus blossoms. But here, in the realm of daily administration, he uses quicker strokes. Each line must be perfect. Papyrus is precious. Mistakes are difficult to erase. The world around him ebbs and flows. Voices pass by: the quiet call of a neighbor, the squeak of a wooden cart. Struggling to remember the difference between bread and offering in script, the scribe is also a teacher. Young boys from modest families sometimes apprentice under him, hoping to one day rise through knowledge alone. It is one of the few paths to social mobility in Egypt, not through inheritance, but through mastery of signs. In the afternoon, he is summoned to the temple storehouse. There, in a cool chamber lined with baskets and sealed jars, The priests dictate inventory: linen for sacred garments, oil for lamps, incense for offerings, wine, barley, cattle. The scribe records it all, standing or kneeling on woven matting, marking each item with care. His presence lends legitimacy to the process. A shipment recorded is a shipment accounted for. Without his pen, a god might go unserved, or a shipment might mysteriously disappear. His work also takes him to the courts. When disputes arise over land, inheritance, dowries, it is the scribe who writes the contracts, prepares the evidence, and presents it to the officials. He must be neutral, factual, clear. His words carry weight, for they preserve events beyond memory. He is not a judge, but a witness, one whose ink testifies across time. Evening comes slowly in Egypt. The sun lingers low above the horizon, bathing the landscape in gold. The scribe returns home with a bundle of scrolls tied neatly with fiber cord. He stores them carefully in clay jars or wooden niches, away from heat and pests. Some he will copy later, preserving them for future generations. Others will be carried to the central archives, a treasury, not of gold, but of knowledge. Before sleeping, he sometimes reads. He owns a few old scrolls, collections of teachings, wisdom literature, hymns to gods. One such scroll, attributed to a scribe named Tehotep, begins, "Do not be arrogant because of your knowledge. Be calm. Speak gently." He reads these words aloud, almost whispering, letting them settle into the air like dust on stone. And so his day ends not with applause nor ceremony, but with silence. Yet through that silence his work endures. The great pyramids may rise in defiance of time, but the words of the scribe travel further still, across centuries, across languages, across worlds. His name may be forgotten, but his lines remain. And now we drift onward from scrolls and sand to something more elusive. Not daily duty, but a search. Not certainty, but mystery. For beneath the ground of Egypt lie clues, objects hidden in tombs and temples, waiting for the careful hands of archaeologists to uncover their stories. Let us now descend gently into the world of lost things and ancient puzzles. Segment 6: Buried Echoes, the Archaeology and Mysteries Beneath the Sand. Now, let your thoughts settle into stillness once more. Let the sounds of ink and reed pens fade. The scent of ink and old scrolls dissolves into dry, sun-warmed air. Our next steps take us not forward, but downward beneath the surface of the earth, into the hush of the forgotten. We are now entering the realm of archaeology, a place not just of science, but of subtle reverence. A place where centuries of silence are occasionally interrupted by the soft brushing of dust from ancient stone. Beneath the sands of Egypt lie millions of stories. Some are grand, the resting places of kings and queens, filled with golden splendor. Others are humble, the graves of farmers or children buried with a handful of amulets and pottery shards. Each of them, however small, carries with it a fragment of the past. Egypt, perhaps more than any other land, is a place of layers. Each grain of sand, disturbed gently, may reveal a handprint from long ago. Imagine a morning deep in the Valley of the Kings. The sun is rising slowly over craggy limestone cliffs. The sky is a pale wash of pink and gold. A team of archaeologists gathers near the base of a dry, narrow ravine, surrounded by tool crates and canvas tents. The air is quiet but charged with anticipation. Somewhere beneath this rocky ground may lie another tomb, sealed, untouched, waiting. There is no drama in the digging, just patience. A trowel scrapes gently against the surface. A brush sweeps away a fine layer of dust. Every movement is deliberate, unhurried. Most days, nothing is found, only stone and earth and the remnants of ancient flood channels. But sometimes, just sometimes, there is a moment, a change in the color of the soil. A hard edge beneath the sand, a fragment of pottery with an inscription. A doorway carved long ago, re-emerging into the light. When a tomb is discovered, the team does not rush in. There is documentation, photography, careful measurement. The entrance may be sealed with plaster and covered in the imprint of a royal seal, its edges worn by time. Breaking it is a serious thing, a quiet act of reverence. For centuries, no one has entered. The air inside is still untouched. To open it is to step gently into another time. Within the tomb, there may be treasure, but not always the kind glittering with gold. There may be painted scenes on plaster walls, boats on the Nile, servants carrying offerings, gods with animal heads welcoming the soul of the departed. There may be wooden coffins stacked like nesting dolls, painted with faces staring serenely upward. There may be papyrus scrolls containing spells to guide the dead through the underworld, texts from the Book of the Dead, faded but legible. But there are also mysteries. Why was this tomb hidden so thoroughly? Why was one coffin reused, bearing the name of two different owners? Why are the canopic jars meant to hold the organs of the deceased empty? These questions are not always answered. The dead do not speak, but their silence is eloquent. Every gap in the record whispers of lost rituals, interrupted plans, or hurried burials during troubled times. One of the most famous of these rediscoveries, of course, is the tomb of Tutankhamun Young. Largely unknown in life, yet immortalized in death by the near total preservation of his burial. discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter. It was hidden beneath debris from later tombs, its entrance unnoticed for centuries. And when at last it was entered, there it lay, a treasury of gilded shrines, ceremonial beds, chariots, amulets, and of course, the golden mask, quiet, beautiful, and watching. But there are also the less famous finds, no less important. In village cemeteries, archaeologists uncover letters written to the dead, small scraps of pottery etched with everyday grief and longing. One might say, "Tell my brother I miss him." Another, "Why do you not answer me in my dreams?" These fragile fragments speak across time, not with grandeur, but with humanity. The same love, the same confusion, the same desire for contact that we feel today. Not all discoveries are met with clarity. Some remain stubborn, unclear, a staircase that leads nowhere. A chamber filled with broken statues, an unfinished tomb carved into the wrong layer of bedrock. What happened here? Was it political change? A sudden death? A forgotten festival never completed? The archaeologist does not always know. Sometimes they must simply observe and let the puzzle rest unsolved. And then there are the deliberate mysteries, hidden caches of sacred objects buried by priests in times of danger, long before the arrival of conquerors. Entire collections of mummified animals, cats, ibises, crocodiles, entombed as offerings, their purpose only partly understood. Statues of pharaohs buried face down in the sand, perhaps toppled in protest. Every layer peeled back reveals something new, and yet still incomplete. In this way, archaeology becomes a kind of quiet conversation, not with people, exactly, but with time itself. The ground answers in fragments, in whispers, in pieces and pieces of pottery and worn inscriptions. The work is never finished. New finds are made each year. Sometimes, beneath a modern street or farmland, a hint appears, a wall out of place, a mosaic, once vibrant, now dulled by time. Each discovery reawakens a sliver of the past, and all of it must be treated with patience. The artifacts removed gently, the inscriptions recorded and translated, the story placed into context. In the best of cases, the objects are preserved, studied, and displayed not for spectacle, but for understanding. A child's doll, carefully sewn. A pair of sandals made for burial. A statue of a god, its nose chipped, its arms lost, but its presence still commanding. As the sun sets on the dig site, the team packs their tools. Notes are updated, photographs stored. The entrance to the tomb may be sealed again to await future study. Or it may be left open, stabilized, and documented for all to learn from. Okay. But one thing is certain: the past, though buried, is not gone. It is patient, and it returns, slowly, through careful hands and quiet minds. Now, let us rise gently from this subterranean world. Our journey through lost tombs and broken seals has revealed both splendor and sorrow. And yet, while archaeologists unearth the traces of every class, there is still another layer of society to consider: those who lived not in villages or temples, but in grand estates and palace gardens. Let us now ascend softly into the world of the elite, where perfumes linger, servants hurry, and lives unfold behind high walls. Segment 7: Gardens Beyond the Dust. Inside the lives of ancient Egypt's nobles. Now imagine yourself rising slowly from the warm quiet of the tombs and storehouses, ascending once more into the sunlit world above, but not into the harsh blaze of desert fields or the bustling rhythm of village life. No, our feet now tread softer ground. Here, the dust is subdued, the air filtered through perfumed blossoms and rustling shade. We have arrived in the domain of the Alethos, whose lives moved to a different rhythm. Slower, more curated, and almost entirely hidden from the public gaze. Picture a private villa on the outskirts of Thebes, sometime in the New Kingdom. The home of a nobleman, perhaps a high-ranking administrator, a priest of standing, or a favored court official. The house is large, but not gaudy. Its walls are whitewashed, its roof flat, shaded with woven mats. The surrounding grounds are carefully maintained. This is not an open courtyard, but a garden enclosed by walls, protected from the sun, the wind, and from common view. The noble's home is arranged around a central garden where symmetry and order are key. At the center of this calm enclosure is a rectangular pool man-made, lined with brick, filled with still green-tinged water. Lotus flowers bloom across its surface. Goldfish drift beneath. The air is rich with the mingled fragrance of myrrh trees, date palms, and acacia blossoms. Gardeners, often slaves or hired workers, tend to each plant with great care. The sound of a reed fountain, gently bubbling, masks the more distant noises of the town beyond. Inside, the noble's life is structured around pleasure, status, and responsibility, though not in equal measure. The early morning begins with the offerings of food, prepared in abundance. Servants bring trays of bread, figs, cucumbers, roasted fowl, honey-sweetened cakes. Linen is brought fresh and scented. Jewelry is selected. Collars of faience, inlays of lapis and carnelian, finely worked gold. Adornment is not vanity here. It is identity, broadcast quietly with every gesture. The nobleman, or lady depending on whose day we choose to follow, might begin with administrative tasks. Letters are read aloud by a steward. Temple donations are reviewed. An issue over laborers working on an estate canal might be raised, requiring negotiation. But these duties are often handled from shaded porticos with wine in hand, and a musician or two playing soft melodies on harp and lyre nearby. Throughout the day, guests may arrive of other officials, traveling merchants, or favored scribes. Courtyards fill with conversation. In the shade of tall palm frond awnings, deals are struck with calm words. Arrangements are made for marriages, for festival offerings, for dowries and land trades. These discussions are often slow and formal, conducted with an air of practiced patience. The noblewoman of the house, meanwhile, oversees her own domain. The management of household servants is no small task. Linens must be dyed and woven, storage jars filled, perfumes prepared, cosmetics blended from ochre and galena. She supervises singers and dancers for evening gatherings, selects tapestries for festival celebrations, and ensures the family's small shrine remains tended with incense and prayers. Even leisure here is curated. There are games sanat, the ancient board game of chance and fate. Painted boards are brought out, and ivory or stone tokens moved in rhythmic, thoughtful turns. Opry is recited, often hymns to gods or love songs, some so delicate in their imagery that they still stir the imagination today. In one such verse, a lover says, "My heart is in your hand, do not let it fall." In the evening, there may be a banquet. Not nightly such affairs were for special occasions, but when they occur, they are grand and deliberate. The noble hosts guests in long, colonnaded halls, the walls painted with vivid scenes of dancer, musicians, and scenes from nature. Servants offer cups of wine flavored with herbs, dishes of lentils, leeks, roast goose, and cakes made from dates and honey pass between reclining guests. Musicians play slow, melodic tunes. Dancers move with stylized grace. Perfume cones placed on heads melt slowly, releasing scent through the hours. Yet, even in this carefully cultivated world, time moves forward. A noble's life is not without concern. There is always the undercurrent of politics, of favor and disfavor at court, of succession, inheritance, and spiritual obligation. Illness comes to all, no matter their station. And every noble must prepare for the afterlife. Tombs must be carved and decorated. Ushabti, figurines, small statues meant to serve the dead in the afterlife, must be commissioned and inscribed. The book of the dead must be prepared, with spells copied and tailored for the individual's journey through the duat, the underworld. But for now, in this moment, none of that intrudes. The sky turns slowly gold, palm trees sway in slow arcs. The noble's home, though removed from the labor of the fields and the clamor of marketplaces, is not silent, but its sounds are soft, deliberate, refined. Evenings bring calm. Lamps are lit, their small flames flickering in terracotta bowls. The scent of blue lotus drifts faintly through the rooms. Children sleep on raised beds under linen canopies, the walls painted with protective gauds. And as night deepens, the nobleman, like the peasant, like the scribe, like the priest, must sleep beneath fine linen sheets, surrounded by carved furniture and polished floors. He closes his eyes, not knowing whether tomorrow will bring favor or misfortune, but for tonight he rests. His world, so carefully ordered, so full of ceremony and scent, lulls itself into peace. Let your thoughts linger a moment longer in that walled garden, beside the still water, beneath a canopy of stars. Then let the breeze take us forward again, out of the courts and courtyards. For beyond the noble estates, beyond the city gates, lies the great flow of life, the unceasing rhythm of work, belief, and tradition that pulsed through the cities of ancient Egypt. Let us now walk softly into the heart of one such city, and listen to its quiet, constant hum. Segment 8. A Day in Thebes. Through the streets of an ancient city, the morning comes softly to the city of Thebes. Horizon blushes with the gentle pink of early light, and the silhouettes of tall palm trees sway against the awakening sky. You find yourself walking slowly along a packed earth road just outside the city gate. The breeze carries the first breath of day cool, but already warming. The desert air mixes with the faint, smoky scent of cooking fires beginning to stir. The world is not yet in motion, but it is ready. As you enter the city, the walls of Thebes rise gently around you. These are not soaring stone towers like later cities, but more modest mud brick constructions, sun-dried, thick-walled, built to endure the long hours of sunlight. Their color is warm and earthy, blending seamlessly with the land. The gates are open, watched over by quiet guards leaning on spears, their linen kilts neat, their eyes scanning without urgency. There is no alarm here, no noise of war or threat. Just the rhythm of life starting again. The street is narrow and shaded in places by mats stretched between buildings. The first to stir are the bakers. Their small open-air ovens are already hot, and the smell of baking bread, yeasty, nutty aroma spills into the lanes. Workers line up for their morning loaves. The bread is coarse, made from emmer wheat, often mixed with bits of bran or husk. It is filling, not delicate. Some carry it wrapped in cloth, while others bite into it directly, walking on. You pass by a potter's workshop next. A boy squats by a spinning wheel, shaping clay with damp, skilled fingers. His father stands nearby, overseeing the firing of finished vessels, storage jars, bowls, cups. The heat from the small kiln is sharp and dry. Stacks of old misshapen rejects lie in the dust, while newly formed pots glistened faintly in the early sun. Further down, the noise of a market begins to rise, low voices, the creak of carts, the clink of copper weights. A woman lays out a basket of onions. Another unrolls a strip of dyed cloth. Merchants from Nubia or the Delta might arrive with dried fish, incense, even rare minerals. Chickens wander underfoot. Children dart through the stalls. The market is not chaotic, but alive, its energy steady, its purpose clear. To your right, a small shrine stands at the corner of two intersecting streets. It's not large, just a painted niche in the wall, housing a statue of a protective deity. Passersby stop for a moment, pressing their fingers to their lips in greeting, placing a single flower or pouring a few drops of beer in offering. The divine is everywhere in the city. It lives not only in grand temples, but in quiet corners, in painted amulets, in whispered prayers beneath one's breath. As the sun climbs higher, craftsmen begin their day. In one shaded alley, a woodworker carves legs for a low stool, smoothing the cedar with rhythmic strokes. Nearby, a jeweler leans over his tools, threading beads of turquoise and gold into an intricate collar. The hum of labor is not loud. It has a softness, an ease, born of repetition. Each movement practiced, each task understood, and then, beyond the workshops and vendors, you come to a quieter district. The homes here are close together, their windows high, their courtyards small. In one, a family prepares for the midday meal. A mother grinds grain with a stone quern, her arms moving in slow, circular motions. A child fetches water from a shared well. The amphora is heavy, but she carries it with care. Inside, the rooms are simple woven mats, low tables, painted wall niches holding household gods. Everything is modest, but there is a sense of comfort, of rhythm, of home. Farther on, you hear the distant sound of chanting. You follow it through winding alleys until it opens onto a broad processional way, the road that leads to the great temples. Priests in long white robes move in calm formation, carrying incense and sistrums. Their heads are shaved, their movements graceful. They are not rushing. The gods are not hurried. The temple itself looms ahead, spylons massive, its columns rising like a stone forest. But today, we do not enter. We simply watch from afar, a quiet observer of a ritual both sacred and familiar. The city breathes through its people. A scribe passes with a satchel full of papyri, his reed pens clinking in their case. A young woman carries dyed linen to a weaver. A group of children plays a throwing game in the dust, their laughter high and fleeting. And always, behind and beneath it all, is the Nile, not visible from every street, but always near. It feeds the city, nourishes it, gives it life. No city, no people. By midday, the city stills slightly. The heat grows. Shadows deepen. People retreat indoors to rest. You find yourself seated under a fig tree, the leaves broad and rustling, casting dappled shade on the earth. You sip water from a clay cup. Around you, the city does not sleep, but it softens. The buzz of conversation fades. Only the low murmur of temple chants and the occasional bark of a dog echo in the quiet. Later, as the sun begins to decline, the city stirs once more. Ovens are lit again. Street corners hum with renewed energy. A storyteller sets up a small stool, gathering children to hear tales of Anubis and Ra, of pharaohs and trickster gods. His voice is slow, melodic, drawing them into a world both mythic and comforting. As twilight falls, oil lamps are lit. Their flickering glow dances on mud brick walls. A cool breeze drifts in from the river. Thebes is never silent, but its sounds change. Footsteps slow. Conversations grow hushed. The city, so full of labor and worship, begins its descent into rest. And, as the stars prick the sky, you leave the city gate once more. Behind you, Thebes, sleep sits, alleys quiet, its rooftops cool, its temples watching in eternal patience. Ahead lies open land again, and with it another path. Now, let us walk softly again, this time into the shadows cast by ambition and power. For in every civilization, there are those who rise for wronged, those who fall. Let us now turn our gaze to the life of one such figure whose path was marked by devotion and controversy alike. Segment 9. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who changed the sun. Imagine now the desert wind growing still. The light shifts subtly, warmer, more golden. The skyline before you is unfamiliar. Its shapes strange, neither the towering pylons of Thebes nor the heavy silhouettes of pyramids, but slender, elegant pillars, open-air courtyards, and walls carved in sunlit relief. You are walking into the city of Akhenaten, the horizon of the Atan, a place that rose from sand and dreams for one man and vanished just as quietly after him. At its heart was a single, unchanging presence, the Aten, not a god with form and tail, but the sun itself round, radiant, eternal. Not Ra sailing across the sky in a boat, not Amen hidden in shadows, but a visible, ever-present disk whose rays reached down with open hands. This was the deity Pharaoh Akhenaten declared supreme, and for 17 years he poured his will into reshaping Egypt in its light. But who was Akhenaten truly? He was born Amenhotep IV, son of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai, a prince of the 18th dynasty. From birth, he was surrounded by power, by tradition, and by the immense weight of divine kingship. Yet, from his earliest years as pharaoh, there were signs he was unlike those who came before him. He was elusive, reclusive, and his attention seemed drawn not to the temples of Thebes, but to a vision of something simpler, purer, quieter. In the 5th year of his reign, he made a remarkable decision. He would leave Thebes. He would found a new city, a sacred place untouched by previous gods, where he could worship the Aten without interference. The city was built quickly, carved into the cliffs and desert plateau, now known as Amarna. It rose with quiet speed, its temples roofless, its spaces bathed in light. And in its heart stood the king, not hidden within sanctuaries, but open to the sky, arms raised in adoration. Akhenaten was not a warrior king. He did not expand Egypt's borders through conquest or dominate foreign lands. His wars were with tradition, with the mighty priesthood of Amen, with the ancient deities of the pantheon, with the very language and symbols of the past. He ordered the names of older gods erased from temple walls. He closed shrines. He promoted a single deity, a singular way of thinking sunlight as source, as presence, as the sole divine being. In art, too, he changed the rules. No longer were pharaohs shown as distant and idealized. Akhenaten's likeness is soft, elongated, and strangely human. He appears with his wife, Nefertiti, and their daughters in domestic scenes, kissing a child. Sitting beneath the Aten's rays, receiving life not as a warrior, but as a father, a man. The art is graceful, flowing. The hands of the Aten reach out like tender fingers, cradling the royal family. With a quiet intimacy no pharaoh's image had known before. And Nefertiti, her presence, her beauty, her power was not merely symbolic. She appeared beside the king in ritual, in decision, in worship. Some believe she may have even ruled briefly after his death. Their partnership, carved into the walls of Akhenaten, suggests a shared vision, deeply personal, quietly radical. But while Akhenaten focused on spiritual transformation, the old world continued. Beyond the sunlit temples of Amarna, the empire faced strain. Vassals in Canaan and Syria cried out for aid in clay tablets, pleas for soldiers, for silver, for attention. The pharaoh did not answer them all. The great power Egypt had wielded under previous kings began to slip quietly, as if unnoticed. And then, without clear warning, the light dimmed. Akhenaten died. His successor, perhaps one of his sons, or even Nefertiti herself, ruled briefly. Then came a boy, King Tutankhamun, soon changed his name to Tutankhamun, and with that change, the slow undoing began. The new court returned to Thebes. The priests of Amun reclaimed their power. The temples reopened. Akhenaten's city was abandoned, its walls left to the desert winds. His statues were broken. His name was removed from monuments. To speak of him became dangerous. He was labeled a heretic, an aberration. Even his tomb was left unfinished. And yet, for all the silence that followed, he was not entirely erased. His city remains half buried in the dust. His poems to the Delicate, serene still, echo across the centuries. In one such hymn, he wrote, "You rise in perfection on the horizon of the sky, O living Aten, creator of life." His was a reign not of conquest, but of contemplation, not of war, but of light. He tried, gently and insistently, to reshape how his people saw the world. And though the old gods returned and the priests resumed their place, something of his vision remained, whispers of a pharaoh who saw the divine not in temples but in the rising sun, and who built a city just to follow its light. As we leave Amarna, the desert wraps us again in warmth and stillness. The sun slips lower in the sky. And though the city lies quiet, forgotten by many, it once pulsed with a dream of light, of devotion, of change without sword or crown. Let us now leave Akhenaten behind, stepping softly back toward the enduring structures of Egypt's faith. For while Akhenaten turned from the gods, most Egyptians leaned into their mysteries. And nowhere were those mysteries more carefully guarded than in the world of the priesthood. Segment 10. The Silent Power. Life inside the ancient Egyptian priesthood. Imagine yourself walking now, not through a bustling marketplace, nor across sunlit fields, but along a smooth, cool corridor. The walls rise high, carved in quiet precision, covered with rows of painted figures, gods, kings offering bowls of incense, and symbols both familiar and strange. The light here is dim. The sounds are hushed. You are entering the inner world of the Egyptian temple, and with it, the realm of the priesthood in order, cloaked in ritual, repetition, and reverence. Temples in ancient Egypt were not places for congregations. These were not public halls of worship, but cosmic machines designed to maintain order in the universe through sacred acts performed behind walls where few ever walked. The gods lived here not as metaphor, but as real presences. Their statues, clothed and fed each day were housed in sanctuaries deeper than the sun's reach. And it was the priest silent, precise, trained from youth who tended them. The day began before dawn. A priest of high rank would rise in the quiet hours, bathe in cool, clean water, often drawn from sacred lakes beside the temple. Purity was not symbolic. It was essential. His body was shaved scalp, brows, every hair removed, to avoid offending the gods with anything unclean. He wore fresh linen, unmarked by stain or scent. He approached the sanctuary barefoot, stepping lightly, never rushed. The first task was awakening the god. The statue, kept behind closed doors all night, was greeted with a hymn and gesture, as one might greet a noble guest. The priest would open the shrine, speak sacred words, and begin the ritual of care. The statue might be an abstract form: gold, wood, stone, or even wrapped in cloth, but it was treated as living. It was washed gently with water and natron, then anointed with oils, dressed in fresh linen, and adorned with jewelry or crowns. Incense was lit: frankincense for one god, myrrh for another, clouds of rich, hurling smoke that drifted softly through the air, hanging in stillness. No idle movement was allowed. Every act had its place. Every word spoken followed a prescribed form, memorized over years. Even the offerings, bowls of bread, beer, roast meat, fruits, and flowers were arranged in careful symmetry, not because the god would eat them, but because their presentation honored divine order. Afterward, these offerings would be distributed to temple staff and the poor, becoming food once more, though touched first by sacred presence. Beyond the rituals themselves, temple life required constant maintenance. Scribes within the priesthood copied sacred texts, recording prayers, myths, and instructions with reed pens dipped in black and red ink. Their scrolls filled shelves in dark chambers where the air was cool and still. Others maintained astronomical records, observing the stars to predict festival dates, or monitored the Nile's flood level. A temple was a center not just of worship, but of knowledge, a quiet library of a civilization's understanding. Priests did not serve full time in most cases. Service was often done in shifts, perhaps 1 month in 4, after which they returned to their homes, their families. But during their time in the temple, they lived within its boundaries, slept in its quarters, and followed its disciplines. Their lives were restrained, focused, reverent. There were ranks within the priesthood. At the highest level were the god's servants, elders who oversaw rituals and maintained the temple's political role. The high priest of Ammon at Thebes, especially during the New Kingdom, was among the most powerful men in Egypt, rivaling even the pharaoh in influence. Temples owned land, stored wealth, employed hundreds. The priesthood was not only spiritual but administrative. A well-run temple required scribes, guards, porters, farmers, and cooks. All moved in tandem, quietly, beneath the eye of the divine. Some priests specialized in healing serving gods like Sekhmet or Thoth, who were believed to grant knowledge of medicine. Others interpreted dreams or omens. Some recited long liturgies during festivals, walking in processions through city streets, with barks bearing the god's image hidden beneath golden canopies. During such times, the barrier between temple and town briefly lifted, and ordinary people saw a glimpse of the divine they served. Women, too, held roles in the temple. Chief among them were the gods' wives, elite women, often royal, who held ceremonial power in Theban temples. Others sang in sacred choirs or played the sistrum, a gentle percussion instrument with a ringing, bronze tambused to please Hathor, the goddess of music and joy. Their voices rose in harmony during rituals, soft and patterned, echoing gently in stone halls. And yet, despite all their duties, the priests themselves left few personal records. They did not write memoirs or seek fame. Their service was quiet, self-effacing. Their legacy lies in the walls of temples' names carved in stone, titles inscribed beside gods, rows of figures performing the same ritual again and again. Time was circular here. The gods did not change. The sun rose, offerings were made, and balance mat was preserved. Perhaps you now feel a kind of peace in this repetition, in this quiet attention to the sacred. Imagine yourself walking once more through a temple's long hall. The columns rise high like lotus stems. The light filters in from slits above, dusty and golden. The floor beneath your feet is smooth with wear. Ahead, the sound of a sistrum, distant but steady. And beside you, a priest, head bowed, carrying a tray of offerings, moving without haste. This is not a life of wealth or comfort, but of precision, reverence, and ritual. A life spent maintaining not just belief, but cosmic balance. For in the Egyptian worldview, the role of the priest was not to question the gods, but to serve them, to keep the world in alignment through acts performed faithfully day after day. Let us now step out of the shadowed halls, leaving behind incense and stone, and return to the everyday rhythms of ancient Egypt. For while the priests labored for the divine, the people labored for life itself. And one group knew that struggle more intimately than most the farmers who lived at the edge of flood and drought. Season and silence. Segment 11. Farmers and the flood. life along the Nile's edge. Now, imagine the sound of water, not the roaring sea, but a quieter rhythm, the lapping of a wide river against the reeds, the slow movement of boats with square sails, the rustle of wind through papyrus. You are standing on the banks of the Nile, not far from a small village. Before you, fields stretch out in ordered rows, green and damp with recent growth. Behind you, huts of mud brick huddle beneath shade trees, their walls whitewashed, their roofs flat and dry. This is the world of Egypt's farmers, the quiet heart of a mighty civilization. Nearly all of Egypt's life unfolded in the narrow band along the Nile. Beyond it stretched the desert, bright and dry and eternal. But within this green strip, where the floodwaters left their black silt, the land was rich, and the people who worked it were many. They were not royalty, nor scribes, nor soldiers. They did not build monuments or appear in grand inscriptions. Yet it was their labor, season after season, that fed the kingdom and allowed its splendors to rise. The year for a farmer did not follow the sun, but the water. The Nile's flood, called the inundation, was their clock. Each year, around June to September, the river swelled with water from rains far to the south. It rose quietly, predictably, and covered the land. When the waters withdrew, they left behind a soft, black soil, fertile, damp, full of promise. This was the time for planting. Grains, mostly barley and emmer wheat, were sown by hand, sometimes scattered by one person, while another walked behind with a wooden hoe, covering the seeds lightly with earth. During the growing season, life was steady. The sun shone. The canals fed the fields. Farmers repaired dikes, cleared irrigation channels, and watched for pests. They lived simply in homes of sun-dried brick, often just 2 or 3 rooms, with small courtyards, storage jars, and low sleeping platforms made of woven reeds. Meals were modest. Bread made from ground barley, sometimes coarse with sand from the grinding stones. Beer, cloudy and thick. Onions, lentils, maybe dates or a piece of dried fish from the river. Children played in the dust. Women ground grain, fetched water, tended goats or geese. Men worked the land and fished or crafted tools in spare moments. Life was communal. Most families shared tools, labor, and harvests, and yet they bore a constant weight, the obligation of tax. For every bushel of grain they harvested, a portion belonged to the state. Scribes arrived with wooden tablets, measuring and recording, calm but unyielding. The grain was taken to central storehouses, from which rations would later be distributed to workers on temples, tombs, and royal estates. Those who could not pay in crops paid with labor carrying bricks, repairing canals, sometimes even serving on state projects. When the flood-failed door came to strong life, became precarious. A weak flood meant shallow soil, poor harvests, and hunger. A violent one could destroy dikes, drown seedlings, or sweep away homes. In such times, prayers were made to Hapi, god of the Nile's gift. Offerings of bread and water were left on banks. The flood was not a disaster, but a divine act. Its irregularity reminded all of their dependence not just on their own toil, but on forces far beyond. There were no clocks. Time was measured by the work. When the seeds were sown, when the canals were dug, when the sheaves were gathered. At harvest, entire villages took part. Sickle blades made from flint or bronze were tied into wooden handles. The grain was cut in handfuls, bound, and carried in baskets. Threshing was done by oxen treading on the grain, followed by winnowing with baskets or fans to separate chaff from seed. It was dusty, sun-soaked work, and yet it was the most vital act in Egypt's endless cycle of life. Despite the simplicity of their lives, the farmers were not forgotten in religious thought. Osiris, god of the underworld, was also god of grain. His story of death and resurrection mirrored the land's own rhythms. His body, dismembered and reassembled, was symbolically linked to the scattering of seed and the rebirth of green from earth. In festivals, seeds were sprouted in trays as offerings. The farmer's world was sacred, even if uncelebrated. Festivals offered rare breaks from labor. These moments brought music, beer, dancing, and stories, small bursts of joy in otherwise measured lives. The Feast of the Valley, for example, allowed families to visit tombs of loved ones, bringing food and flowers, sharing a meal among ancestors. It was both remembrance and renewal. And still, through all of it, the work continued, quietly, patiently. Imagine now a man walking his narrow field at sunrise. His feet are bare. His robe is coarse linen, tied at the waist. He carries a tool over his shoulder. In the distance, geese honk. A dog barks lazily. His son trails behind, curious, half asleep. There is no hurry. The soil is damp. The day is beginning. This rhythm, this patient movement of hands through earth, sustained Egypt for millennia. Its cities might rise and fall. Its dynasties shift, but the flood would come again. The fields would wait, and the farmers, unrecorded though they were, would return, as they always had, to coax life from silt and water. Let us now turn from the fields back toward the walls that rose on their labor. For not far from the edge of harvest and hut stood another world, entirely one of elegance, indulgence, and fragrance. The lives of the elite were carved in tombs, painted in color, preserved in letters and objects left behind. In our next segment, we'll step quietly into a noble home, where wealth brought comforts unimaginable to those who sowed and reaped. Segment 12: Linen, Leisure, and Lotus Wine. The life of the ancient Egyptian elite. Imagine now that you are walking not through fields, but along a smooth path lined with low, flowering shrubs. The sun is warm, but you are shaded by rows of date palms. Ahead lies a large estate, whitewashed walls, enclosing a garden lush with vines and fruit trees, a pool glinting in the center. Beyond the entrance, the walls are decorated with colorful paintings, images of musicians, birds and boats, of gods and honored ancestors. The scent in the air is no longer of soil and water, but of myrrh, lotus oil, and fresh-cut flowers. You are entering the home of a noble Egyptian, man or woman of means, of education, and of inherited grace. The elite of ancient Egypt lived lives that, in contrast to the farmer or artisan, were filled with relative comfort and choice. Their homes were made of mud brick, like all others, but on a grander scale. Large villas often included private rooms, guest quarters, kitchens, and storage areas, sometimes even separate apartments for stewards or scribes. But perhaps most prized was the garden, carefully cultivated and irrigated, where trees bore figs, sycamore, fruit, dates, and pomegranate, and where lotus flowers floated on artificial ponds. These gardens were not only practical, providing shade and food, but symbolic caicos of paradise, representations of eternal balance and fertility. Within these walls, life moved at a slower rhythm. The household would rise early, servants already preparing food. The bread was finer, here sifted, shaped carefully, baked in clay ovens by trained cooks. Beer was less coarse, often flavored with herbs or fruit. For those truly wealthy, wine was available, sweet, rich, stored in large amphorae, marked with vineyard names and years. Clothing was simple but elegant, fine linen pleated into flowing garments, often whitened with chalk. Women applied eye paint made from malachite or galena, kohl lining their eyes not just for beauty, but also for sun protection and to ward off disease. Jewelry was abundant, collars of gold and semi-precious stones, earrings, bracelets, and rings, each chosen not just for adornment, but for symbolic meaning and protection. But the greatest luxury of all may have been time to read, to write, to observe the world, and to host guests in shaded courtyards where music drifted in the background. Education was a mark of status, and elite families ensured that their sons and sometimes daughters were trained in reading and writing from a young age. A boy might study under a private tutor or at a temple school, arithmetic, moral instruction, and the art of formal letter writing. He might one day become a scribe, a high official, or even a royal advisor. These were not idle ambitions, but structured paths prepared for early in life. The elite served in various roles. Many were administrators, tax officials, priests, or overseers of granaries and building projects. Their work required not just literacy, but diplomacy, memory, and a deep understanding of protocol. A nobleman might spend a part of his day reviewing documents, meeting with estate managers, or receiving messages from distant parts of the kingdom. Others were artists, architects, physicians, or scholars. Their careers were often inherited, their positions secured through family name and favor. Still, the household remained a center of life. Meals were often shared in courtyards, reclining on mats or low chairs. Dishes of lentils, cucumbers, honey-sweetened cakes, roast goose, and pickled fish might be served. Music was frequently performed by family members or hired entertainers playing harps, lyres, and lutes, their melodies slow and patterned. Dancers moved with practiced grace, their arms curved like reeds in the wind. It was an atmosphere of cultivated ease, where each element's sound, movement, was curated for harmony. Despite their privileges, the elite were deeply preoccupied with death, not in fear, but in preparation. Tombs were commissioned early in life, and much energy was spent planning inscriptions, paintings, and offerings to ensure one's place in the afterlife. The tombs of nobles, especially in Theban necropolises like Sheikh Abid el-Qurna, offer vivid glimpses into elite daily life scenes of banquets, hunting in papyrus marshes, fishing trips, musical performances, and offerings to the gods. These were not fantasies, but memories, idealized and preserved in pigment and stone. Marriage among the elite was often arranged within families or among powerful households, ensuring status and inheritance. Women of noble rank held considerable influence managing estates, participating in religious roles, even acting as regents in some cases. Letters and legal documents reveal their literacy and economic agency, as well as the bonds of affection and formality that governed their world. And yet, even in this life of beauty and balance, there were undercurrents of tension. Wealth had to be maintained. Status could shift. The court's favor was never permanent. Scribal letters warn of the dangers of arrogance, of speaking unwisely, of neglecting one's duties. A nobleman might fall out of favor and be recalled from office, or worse, see his family's wealth reassigned by royal decree. As in all human lives, the illusion of permanence was gently but constantly challenged by time. Still, the elite had a phrase that echoed through many tombs: a life well lived, a day well spent. It was not a boast, but a gentle expression of thanks or recognition that beauty, when paired with balance and reverence, could become sacred. They sought to carry that balance into eternity. Imagine now, just for a moment, reclining in a shaded courtyard. The pool beside you reflects a sky slowly turning gold. A musician strums a gentle note, rhythmic, soothing. A breeze stirs the leaves. A servant offers you a cup of lotus wine. It is late afternoon. The day is slowing peacefully. Let us now step quietly from the world of comfort into another kind of remembrance, one carved deep in the rock, far from the gardens and pools. In our next segment, we descend into the Valley of the Kings and explore the sacred architecture of royal tombs, where pharaohs dreamed of eternity and prepared for the long journey beyond death. Segment 13: The Valley of the Kings, preparing Pharaoh for eternity. Now imagine the silence of stone. You are standing at the edge of a barren valley. The sun is high, but the wind is still, and only the faintest trace of dust moves along the rock. The cliffs here are pale, chalky, and sharp. No trees, no water, no birds. And yet, within this emptiness lies one of the most sacred places in ancient Egypt, the Valley of the Kings, where kings slept, sealed beneath earth, an inscription hidden beneath the cliffs. This quiet valley on the west bank of the Nile, near ancient Thebes, was chosen not for beauty, but for secrecy. Earlier, pharaohs had built pyramids in the open desert. But over time, tomb robbers learned their patterns, cracked open their treasures, winding deep into the mountains, away from prying eyes. And so began a centuries-long practice, sealing the dead within the earth, guarded not by height, but by depth, not by stone sentinels, but by corridors filled with symbols and spells. The construction of these tombs began early in a king's reign. Often within the first few years, masons, architects, and artisans would begin their chiseling narrow shafts into limestone. Carving rooms in sequence, smoothing the walls for decoration. The tombs varied in complexity. Some stretched over 100 meters underground, with long corridors, pillared chambers, and burial vaults carved deep into the rock. Others were shorter, simpler, but always intentional, always symbolic. Every surface within the tomb told a story. The ceilings were painted with stars, guiding the king through the night sky. Walls were covered with scenes from sacred texts: the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, the Amduat. These were not merely illustrations, but maps, guides to the underworld, charts of the journey through darkness to the dawn of rebirth. Each god, each serpent, each doorway depicted held meaning. The king's soul would pass through 12 hours of night, meet guardians, overcome trials, and if worthier, again with the sun god Ra in his morning boat. The artisans who created these tombs lived in a small, secluded village not far from the Valley Deir el Medina. Their lives were modest but respected. They were skilled workers, painters, sculptors, stonecutters, and draftsmen, all literate, all chosen. Their days were measured with discipline. They knew the value of each curve, each pigment, each stroke of the brush. Their work was not decoration, it was devotion. They painted not for admiration, but for eternity. The burial chamber, the heart of the tomb, was where the king's body would be placed within a sarcophagus, often made of quartzite or red granite. Around him, amulets, statues, furniture, and jars of preserved food. A boat might be placed nearby, symbolic transport for the journey to the stars. Everything was arranged with care protection spells inscribed on wrappings, golden masks placed over the face, sacred texts folded between the linens. The goal was not merely to bury, but to prepare for judgment, for passage, for renewal. Despite their best efforts, many of these tombs were eventually robbed. Even in ancient times, some were emptied, their treasures scattered, but the belief in the afterlife endured. Even when gold was taken, the inscriptions remained. The names of the kings still echo through the painted halls: Thutmose, Seti, Ramesses, Amenhotep. Their images stare back from the walls, arms crossed, calm and eternal. Perhaps the most famous of all was found much later in modern times. The tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered by Howard Carter in 1922, was nearly intact. Though small compared to others, it offered a window into the care, the richness, and the profound symbolism that surrounded royal burials. Within its chambers were golden shrines, ivory chests, fine sandals, and jars of perfume sealed for millennia. Most striking of all was the golden mask eyes outlined in black, lips soft and composed, the cobra and vulture crowning the brow. A face intended to be seen forever, even in darkness. Yet for all their splendor, these tombs were not built to be visited. They were meant to be sealed, to vanish into the rock. Their secrecy was part of their sanctity. The entrance blocked with rubble, their paths forgotten. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end, but a door. The tomb was a cocoon, a place where the soul would rest, transform, and rise again. Imagine now walking through one of these tombs, your steps echoing gently off painted walls. The air is cool. On one wall, Ra's solar boat floats across the hours. On another, the king is greeted by Osiris, his arms open. Every surface, every shadow whispers the same thing: passage, renewal, return. Let us now emerge slowly from the tomb. The light of day is soft now. The sun is lower. The cliffs cast long shadows. As we walk away from the valley, the silence still holds. But ahead, the river awaits once more, ever steady, ever giving. And beyond it, the bustle of life continues. In our next segment, we shall step back into the ordinary, into the lively world of Egyptian marketplaces, where voices rise, spices mingle, and the daily exchange of goods and stories fills the air. Segment 14: Baskets, Barter, and Bulrushes. A day in the market. Imagine now the sound of footsteps on hard-packed earth. The sun is rising, and the light glints off the Nile's slow-moving water. Along the banks and within the heart of each Egyptian town or village, another kind of life awakens. The market is stirring. You hear the low murmur of voices, the occasional bray of a donkey, the quiet rustle of rush baskets being unpacked. This is where Egypt's cities lived and breathed in, open spaces filled with trade, talk, scent, and color. Unlike modern economies based on coins and currency, ancient Egypt's economy ran largely on barter and account. Most people did not carry money. Instead, they measured value in grain, linen, cattle, and labor. Barley and emmer, wheat staples of the Nile floodplains, were not just food, but currency. A sack of grain could be exchanged for oil, a pair of sandals, or time worked. Over time, this system became structured. State scribes kept tallies. Payments to workers were made in rations, bread, beer, and goods. And in the market, a more fluid kind of negotiation took place, guided by custom, mutual need, and the patient rhythm of exchange. Imagine yourself walking between stalls. Vendors sit on mats shaded by strips of woven reed, their goods carefully arranged. There are onions and garlic stacked in wide clay bowls, baskets of dates, dark and sticky with ripeness, and bundles of fresh herbs, coriander, mint, fenugreek. Fish is laid out on flat stones, some smoked, some freshly caught from the Nile, and still glistening. One seller pours honey into tiny pots. Another unwraps bundles of incense, the air thick with a warm, sweet scent of frankincense and myrrh. Artisans bring their wares: small clay oil lamps, wooden combs, linen tunics folded neatly, and sandals braided from papyrus fiber. There are beads of faience, bright blue like river water, and amulets shaped like ankhs and scarabs. A basket maker displays his work-tight coils of woven reed that will carry grain, hold fish, or bear offerings to the gods. Across the square, a group of children watches a snake charmer perform, the cobra swaying lazily to the sound of a flute. Barter here is gentle but firm. A woman brings a jar of beer to exchange for a small loaf and some dried figs. A man offers to repair a pair of sandals in exchange for a handful of garlic bulbs. No coins change hands, but value moves fluidly between the people based on need, trust, and shared rhythm. A scribe from the local temple passes by, observing quietly, perhaps here to procure incense for a ritual or linen for wrapping sacred objects. His presence reminds the people of another kind of market, one less visible, but just as vital, the sacred economy, where offerings flowed not to households, but to gods. Markets differed depending on location and size. In larger cities like Memphis or Thebes, markets were bustling, dense, and diverse. Foreign goods appeared here: lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, copper from Sinai, and spices from far to the south. Merchants from Nubia, Libya, and the Levant brought their wares, sometimes as part of royal trade delegations. For the average Egyptian, these rare items, glassware, perfumes, exotic oils, were wonders to glimpse, not possess. Even in these lively spaces, the market was not only about commerce. It was a place of stories, of gossip, of news. One might hear of a neighbor's new child, a decree from the pharaoh, or a recent flood's height. Women shared recipes and complaints. Men exchanged farming advice. Children lingered near fruit stalls, hoping for something sweet. Amid the bartering and trading, life unfolded full, imperfect, enduring. The market, too, was where people encountered authority. Tax collectors moved through the stalls, ensuring that state dues were met. Inspectors weighed goods, checked measures, and monitored grain quality. The state kept close watch over the economy, met with record-keeping. Scribes maintained ledgers, counting what came in, what went out, what was owed. These written trays sound on astraca, papyrus, and temple walls give us insight into a world structured, even in its apparent informality. But for most Egyptians, markets were less about rules and more about rhythm. The market was a social fabric as much as an economic one. You might spend hours not buying or selling, but talking, listening to a neighbor recite a short poem, watching a boy mimic a priest, or helping a friend tie a bundle for travel. Time flowed slowly. The heat grew. And the Nile waves present flowed just beyond the town, a quiet partner in all things. As the day wore on, the market began to close. Baskets emptied. Leftovers were packed away. Stalls were tied down. Sellers prepared to return to their homes, often by boat or cart, along roads dusty and uneven. The chatter faded. Smoke from cook fires replaced the morning's incense. By nightfall, only a few figures might linger in the square, perhaps a storyteller, spinning a tale by lamplight, his voice steady and low, his audience drowsy from heat and bread. Imagine again that you are walking back from this market. Your arms are full perhaps with grain or fish or a new linen wrap. The sounds have faded into memory. The stars are emerging, soft pinpricks in the indigo sky. The scent of the river drifts on the breeze, familiar. The day has passed, full and slow. In our final segment, we'll reflect on what it meant to live a life in ancient Egypt, whether as farmer or priest, laborer or nobleman, how the hopes and fears of that long-ago world continue to whisper across time. We'll return to the rhythm of the Nile one last time and ease our thoughts toward rest. Segment 15. The rhythm of their lives. Reflection at the end of the day. Now the light has faded. The sky over the Nile is a deep blue, tinged with the last warmth of the sun. The villages are quieter now. Boats have been moored. Fires are lit in simple clay hearts, and the laughter of children has given way to the soft murmur of evening voices. Somewhere, a reed flute plays a wandering tune. It is gentle, almost mournful. In this hour, the day begins to exhale. So much of ancient Egypt moved in cycles. The river rose, the river fell, the moon waxed and waned. Crops were planted, harvested, and planted again. Life and death, neither feared nor denied, were simply stages along a path walked by all. There was continuity in this ancient land, a belief in balance between light and dark, land and water, past and future. And so, as the day ends and the stars emerge once more over the silent desert, let us pause and consider what it meant to live within that rhythm. For the farmer, life meant patience. He watched the sky for signs, listened to the land, and read the river as one might read a sacred text. He rose with the sun, worked in its heat, and slept beneath its echo. He lived with calloused hands and quiet pride, giving his strength to the land that in turn gave him food, shelter, and continuity. For the artisan, life was measured by craft. Each curve of a chisel, each flick of pigment, each knot in a basket mattered. There was reverence in work, not because it was seen, but because it was seen by gods, by ancestors, by time itself. To leave a mark, however small, was to live beyond one's body. For the scribe, life meant order. He translated the world into ink and symbol. He counted harvests, recorded births, wrote hymns, copied myths. He stood close to power, but bowed always to knowledge. His pen was quiet, but enduring. For the priest, life was ritual. Sunrise and sunset held meaning. Incense, offerings, chants, they were bridges between the visible and the invisible. In his robes and silence, The priest reminded his people that the gods were always watching, always waiting, always within reach. And for the rulers, the kings and queens, the lords of stone and gold, life was duty. Their names were carved in hieroglyphs, meant to last forever. But their power came with burden. They led wars, built monuments, claimed divinity, but they too walked among tombs and planned for the journey beyond. Every life, no matter its station, moved in rhythm with the Nile. The river's current shaped time. The flood brought life. The retreat left fertile land, and the dry months taught patience. It was this natural ebb and flow that defined what it meant to be Egyptian. To live was to listen to the earth, the river, the sky, and the soft voice of eternity beneath it all. Imagine now that you are lying beside that river. The cool air drifts gently across your skin. The rushes rustle in the dark. Somewhere, the distant cry of a heron echoes through the stillness. Overhead, the stars gleams, some steady. You are far from the stone walls of the tombs, far from the markets and temples. There is no gold here, no pharaohs, no scribes. Only the earth beneath you and the timeless sky above. And yet, in this quiet place, you are close to them all. Because the rhythm of their lives continues not in monuments, but in the stories they left behind. In the rows of ancient grains still found in tombs, in the hieroglyphs that whisper across time, in the humble sandals carefully placed for a journey into the next world. They are not gone. They are only quiet now, like the river at night. So rest now. Let the dust of the day settle. Let your breath slow and your thoughts drift, like boats slipping gently down the Nile. The kings have been buried. The markets have closed. The fields have been sown. The cycle will begin again. But for now, all is still. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams carry you gently, like the river itself, through the long, soft hush of history.